Welcome back from lunch. Hopefully next year we will be able to have lunch together. Our first panel of the afternoon is the always exciting topic of technology and innovation in shipping. Moderating the panel today is Greg Chase, a partner in the law firm of Reed Smith in New York. Panelists are our conference chair, Marina Hadjipateras, co-founder and general partner of the venture capital fund TMV, Alex Panagopoulos, CEO of supercruises.com and Forward Ships, and chairman of Arista Group, Nikos Petrakakos, co-founder and managing partner of Ursus Maritime Capital, Robert Schluter, managing director of E1 Marine, Dallas Smith, vice president of LNG and offshore for LISCR, the Liberian registry, and general manager of their Houston office, and Tuomas Riski, CEO of Norsepower.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Chase. I'm a partner in the New York office of Reed Smith, where I lead the firm's shipping and transactional team in New York. We work on a range of finance and corporate transactions for the shipping industry, work for banks, for owners, quite a number of funds and other alternative capital providers for the industry. We see ourselves as a global one-stop shop for a full range of services that shipping clients need. In recent months, I've represented clients in a number of transactions relating to business ideas that connect innovative technologies to shipping. These experiences caused me to recognize that after hearing so much about ESG themes for several years now, we're really seeing a groundswell of activity that made me really eager to host this panel. Coming out of this pandemic, I think there's more optimism about innovation in shipping. There's been quite a lot of attention on supply chain constraints, which I think has shown a bright light on transportation industry generally. And I think we've got a great panel talk about a number of themes brought forward by these issues and current events. Let's go down the line and just have each panelist introduce themselves. Maybe we'll start in the upper left, for the folks I can see. Robert, that would be you.
Perfect. Well, good morning, Greg. Thank you very much. Rob Schluter, I'm managing director of E1 Marine. We're a developer of methanol to hydrogen generation technology that essentially we're facilitating the adoption of fuel cell power solutions in the marine industry.
Thanks, Robert. How about Marina next?
Sure, and good morning, and thanks, Greg. I'm Marina Hadjipateras, and I am the co-founder and general partner of TMV, which is an early-stage venture capital fund. We focus on seed and Series A, and we invest in supply chain, logistics, and shipping, as well as financial inclusion, sustainability, and healthcare and the future of work.
Nikos?
Thanks, Greg. I'm Nikos Petrakakos, managing partner and founder at Ursus Maritime Capital. We do retrofit financing and consulting for anything on energy efficiency and emissions reduction technologies. And I'm also partner at Argo Capital Advisors, where we work with early stage ventures and late stage ventures, both in and out of shipping.
Thanks, Nikos. Tuomas?
Good morning. My name is Tuomas from Norsepower, Finland. I'm the CEO of the company, and we are the market leader on the segment of mechanical sales for large ships. We have a proven track record. We have so far fitted 6 different ships with our rotor sails, and we have proven that we can typically reduce the fuel consumption and emissions between 5 and 25% with our technology.
Thank you. Dallas?
Good morning. Thank you, Greg. I'm Dallas Smith, VP of LNG and Alternative Fuels for the Liberian Registry. I joined the Liberian Registry back in 2020 after retiring from the U.S. Coast Guard. My last 6 years in the Coast Guard, I ran the Coast Guard's Liquefied Gas National Center of Expertise, where we oversaw all gas carrier, LNG as fueled, LNG bunkering, and LNG terminal projects and approvals for the U.S. Coast Guard, in addition to alternative fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. I have a similar role here at the Liberian Registry. I'm based out of Houston, but I lead the global gas team, where we approve new designs, oversee construction and delivery through to operation of liquefied gas vessels, dual fuels, and alternative fuels. A little bit about the Liberian Registry. We're the second largest flag state in the world and the fastest growing. We currently have the most deep draft dual fuel vessels on the water and have issued the most AIPs for new design vessels, including hydrogen, ammonia, liquid CO2, and methanol. I'm very excited to be a part of this panel. It's one of the best lineups I've seen.
Thanks, Dallas. Alex?
Greg, Alex Panagopoulos. I'm the founder and CEO of Forward Ships. In the past, we have developed a number of patented solutions for machinery arrangements on board ships, concentrating on LNG. And lately, we're focusing on supply chain solutions on LNG primarily.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for the introductions. We all know that over the last several years, the IMO has introduced regulations intending to make shipping a greener industry with targets for more efficient ships and reduced emissions by 2050. I think it's fair to say that at least prior to the pandemic, sitting where I sit in New York, it seemed like there was kind of slow, resistant uptake from the shipping community. But I think that's changed. Maybe it was changing more than I realized prior to the pandemic. But coming out of the pandemic, it seems like there's a real surge of interest. Nico, I'm wondering, could you set the stage for us a little bit? What would you say from your vantage point is contributing to this environment we're in now?
Sure. I mean, from my side, I would say it seems to be a mix of various causes. COVID certainly something that has triggered some of these changes because, as you mentioned earlier, shipping has come more to the forefront of regular people that so far, when you say shipping, they thought UPS. So, it's also what's changed is before the pressure was purely financial. You wouldn't want to do any upgrades to your ships or do anything unless there was pressure from the investors. That's already starting to come now, whether it's Poseidon Principles or other avenues, Sea Cargo Charter, and that's starting to push. And then us all working from home, and that's changed and driven the digitalization side of things within shipping. So I think, COVID was probably the trigger of maybe already things that were already in motion beforehand.
So Nikos, you and I were talking before, there's almost like two tracks to this discussion, isn't there? There's digitalization in shipping, and then there's the energy transition. Are these two themes related, or are they kind of separate and apart, and do they have similar drivers?
The drivers are probably similar, but if you look at a Venn diagram, it's probably a small sliver where they actually meet with something like a performance margin solution, autonomy, issues like that. I think in terms of where the capital is and the approach is very different on the two fronts. Where it comes to decarbonization, it's mostly infrastructure related, where the capital needs to go and where it's going. And then there's that capital for the alternative fuels and energy efficiency solutions, which is a very different market than, let's say, what Marina is working on, which is still, I would say, even more in its infancy than decarbonization is within shipping. But there's a lot of attention into the industry from both growth stage PE VC investors and sort of earlier stage VCs.
Marina, what would you say about that?
I agree with Nikos, and I would say that to take Nautilus Labs, which is one of our first investments out of our first funds, which aggregates data on the bridge of a ship, and it ultimately improves efficiency. But by improving the efficiency on board a ship, and being able to see weather patterns in real time, you can also reduce emissions by 30%. So I think that the digitization and the platforms that are being created and the communication that is now being created through these different platforms and artificial intelligence ultimately help a reduction in emissions because there's more efficiency around that. So every platform that we're investing in, which is kind of future of work, can also lie within sustainability, because by having data connect with each other and realizing that there's going to be a delay, so you need to slow down, you have to reduce engine speed and then reduce fuel consumption, and then less emissions are let out. You're actually they do actually go hand in hand a lot of the time with each other. So the 5 now shipping companies that we've invested in, while they may gain a partnership with a ship owner because of their efficiency and cost savings, ultimately there's always a part of them that we can refer to where they've actually reduced carbon footprint and reduced emissions as well. And so I agree with Nikos, but I would take it that step further and say I think they are going hand in hand a little bit more now.
That's very interesting. We have, of course, on this panel, we have people representing 3 different categories of alternative propulsion. I'm wondering if these gentlemen also see kind of an uptick in interest in alternative propulsion, or is it just something that seems to be the case, sitting where I sit in New York? Robert, maybe we'll start with you.
Certainly. So from my perspective, with the onset of COVID, what I found is that people started, they went back to their home offices and they started to think more strategically about how they were going to implement these decarbonization strategies that have been under discussion for a number of years. But now they had to start, how are they going to take action on that? And so where I've seen is conversation shift from let's do a demonstration project to validate the technology to actually ordering ships or vessels to, beyond just a single vessel to try to understand how this would work within their fleets, because they have a fair amount of investment that needs to be made in the next 5 to 8 years to meet the IMO guidelines or other regional guidelines on the decarbonization. And so we've seen a tremendous increase. And just from our announcement of building one towboat in December, we've now got order interest of potentially another 15 of the same class that we're hoping to facilitate here, those orders in the next 3 to 4 months.
Tuomas, what would you say?
Yeah, thanks. I see that there's a rapid uptake right now in fuel saving and emissions reduction technologies. And I see like 4 items which are supporting this trend. Number one is that fuel prices and energy prices, they are higher than ever. That's motivating through low paybacks in the investment of fuel saving and emissions reduction technologies. Other thing is that I already see that industry is starting to discount future carbon prices. It's evident that emissions trading in some format will be part of shipping in the future, and I see that our customer companies are nowadays already discounting that kind of future with carbon pricing. Then I see already kind of compliance-based demand. Shipping companies are investing in our rotor sales to be compliant with forthcoming EEXI and CII indexes. That's already part of the game. They don't want to reduce the service speed of the ships. Instead, they invest in rotor sales or other similar technology to make the ships more efficient. And the fourth segment of demand today, I see that ESG is now playing an important role. Companies want to show that they are doing something to be more sustainable. So this is how I see it. This all happened during COVID period, or it in a way accelerated. I think COVID hasn't been the real catalyst behind it. Just appears so that these things happened at the same time, and now we really have a great market for these energy saving technologies.
Alex, what would you say about this? Is this owners trying to get ahead of the game, or is it greenwashing for investors, or is there an intrinsic business case now that people are really finding faith in?
Ship owners care about the cheapest solution always and the more practical. That's a matter of fact. But I would echo everybody in the panel. Fuel prices, carbon pricing, compliance, and ESG, of course, all play a role. I would add to Tuomas' last comment that he mentioned about ESG from companies. I would say that there's ESG mandates from investors and from banks as well. And all of this is basically painting a picture where everything becomes stricter and stricter as we move on. Frankly, I've said it a number of times before. I'll say it again here. It comes to me a little bit as a surprise to see ship owners still building ships powered by oil. So, ordering a ship today for the next 25 years and expecting it to continue going with oil as its main source of power, fuel converted into power, that's a surprise. The next 5 years are going to be, we'll see tremendous things happening. We know IMO, we know Poseidon Principles, but we know the Sea Cargo Charter, but you cannot ignore the society and the pressures that are being put upon all of us by society. Things are, this January, this February, the climate has been going crazy throughout the world, and everybody's feeling it.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Dallas, from your perspective, you're sort of in a position to see, the momentum of the change, because I gather when new designs are proposed, they have to come through the registry and very often come through you. What would you say? Are you seeing in the real world an increased trend?
Yeah, definitely seen a huge uptake, just like the other panelists are saying. I agree. I don't know if COVID was a driving factor, but if you look back at IMO in 2018, when they put together the strategy, a lot of owners were kind of waiting to see, what the requirements were. So then in 2020, when the IMO met and then, and approved the draft amendments, and then again in 2021, they implemented them with timelines. I think this is what really kicked off the movement. And from what we're seeing at the registry, we've had a double in orders for dual fuel vessels from 2020 to 2021. And on the design basis, we're heavily involved in JDPs and JIPs, which is joint development projects and joint industry projects, where we're working with various stakeholders, the shipyards, the manufacturers, the owners, the operators, class, for these new designs. And we've got tons of these, and they're moving quickly. We're getting new ones every day. It's very exciting to be a part of this movement. Like I said in my intro, we're seeing hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, liquid CO2 carriers, for the carbon capture aspect. So it's definitely growing, and expected to continue to grow in the future.
Thank you for that perspective, Dallas. Marina, I think we're going to dive a little bit more into these technologies, but before we do, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about trends you're seeing on the digital side. You mentioned a couple of examples a couple of minutes ago, but what types of digital technologies do you think will be the most compelling going forward?
Sure. So I think there are a few different trends that I'm seeing. Definitely the aggregation of data, which again improves efficiency, and I think that's one trend that's been happening even like pre-COVID. I think that the adoption of it and of digitization has excelled because of COVID, because the mindset of the ship owner, I think, has changed through COVID, to be honest. But along with that, I'm also seeing autonomy as something that is slowly becoming more and more prevalent, and I think by 2030 that will definitely take more of a stand and be even more in the mainstream of the shipping world. And then the communication that I mentioned, we invested in a company called Portcast, which has an API that you put on container ships at the moment, which helps container ships communicate on where they are, again, if there's a delay, and then they can communicate with the manufacturers and with the port. And ultimately, it's like an end-to-end process for supply chain to become more seamless. And also, with the events that took place over COVID and the bottlenecks that took place, it's Portcast is exactly what we're looking for. And communication didn't exist between different container ships and different companies. And so while one specific company might know how their own supply chain is running, I think one of the biggest problems was we didn't have a larger infrastructure for everybody to communicate with each other. So then you just have everyone coming, and delays and wait times. And then on top of that, people were getting sick with COVID. So Portcast and AI and different ways in which technology is being used for communication. And Portcast also does air as well, air freight. And so I think those are three trends: the autonomy, aggregation of data, and communication overall, along with safety and security. I think is a huge reduction in fraudulence in terms of what goods are being carried, is something that's also up and coming.
Thank you for that. Nikos, do you have any perspective on those points? Is the investing community picking up on these opportunities? And if so, where's this interest coming from?
Yeah, I would certainly agree, and I would add even that I think what Marina was saying about this lack of data and visibility into the various nodes, that everyone has their own piece. I think that's what has brought this initial interest from investors into the shipping world, from people that weren't in the shipping world, that they realize through these disruptions in the supply chain that trucking, having investments in trucking and rail doesn't necessarily alleviate everything. If one part of the cog is not working, the whole supply chain is not working. So they realize there's a lot of untapped opportunity in this, cargo visibility side of things in the maritime industry. So that's bringing this attention. I would say the initial attention is coming from later stage VCs that are almost like a PE, looking for bigger companies and bigger checks, whether it's Project 44, Navis, that was bought by Excel KKR, some of that kind of stuff. And then you have an increasing attention on the earlier stage, like what Marina is doing. There's a lot of different opportunities there. It's still a lot more nascent. There's a lot of fragmentation in the industry. So, I would say there's still a lot of consolidation that's going to happen in the future that will probably attract that next step of investors as well. But certainly the themes of automation and sort of data integration, and actually using the data, that's the next step too. So far we're just collecting data. The next step is actually using machine learning, AI to give us, actionable KPIs through it. So.
Are the investors that are pursuing some of these themes, are they different investors that are interested in the energy transition, or is there some overlap?
I would say the overlap is fairly limited. There's the occasional VC that also likes hardware, but a lot of the VCs tend to like just the SaaS model or something along those lines. Whereas, at least on the energy efficiency and emission side, a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure. We're focused on the ship, but most of the investment will happen on shore with, the production of alternative fuels, the fueling infrastructure, et cetera. And that's more infrastructure type investors or large PEs, or it just comes through banks.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'd like to dive into the technologies a little bit. If we have time, hopefully we can explore where the capital is going to come from to implement some of the technological opportunities that we're starting to see. Robert, could you tell us a little bit about your company and the technology you have and the types of interest you're getting in the market?
Certainly. So I'll try to be fairly efficient here, but fuel cell power is being widely adopted in the transportation sector. And the challenges around it is really in regards to hydrogen, its storage, the logistics regards to it, or perhaps the cost of it, at the point of use. What E1 Marine does is we've got a technology where we convert a very hydrogen-dense fuel, methanol and water, into hydrogen at the point of demand. And so you end up with you get an energy-dense fuel, and really the issues we solve in regards to range and expense, and these issues are most acute on the marine side, where you've got range expectations that go beyond a single day to multiple days, or something that would go across the ocean with an auxiliary power unit. And so really that's what we do, is we solve a logistics issue and a cost issue as it relates to hydrogen, and allow the vessel operators to adopt a very commercial ready fuel cell power solutions. We solve the hydrogen challenge. Now they can move forward with a clean fuel cell power solution that essentially produces no emissions. And so I'll stop there to give the other panelists some time to talk about their technology.
Well, thanks for that. And I think hopefully we can have some discussion about where that technology can be used and what types of vessels. But Tuomas, tell us about your technology and how it's been deployed.
Yes, so we provide mechanical sails called rotor sails, which convert ocean wind into forward thrust of the ship. They reduce fuel consumption and emissions. I see the future so that we always need some fuels to propel the ships. But it looks like the future fuels, they will be, for example, hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol. But I see that they will be so expensive that to make this logistics happen, you need to minimize the fuel consumption. And for this reason, I really see that these hybrid technologies, like our mechanical sails, are entering to the market. In typical cases, we can reduce the fuel need on annual period between 5 and 25%. And if and when the energy is getting more expensive and carbon pricing is entering the market, the paybacks for these kind of technologies will be extremely short. So I see the world is developing in this way. We are developing hybrid ships using multiple energy sources, for example, ocean wind, to minimize the actual fuel need. And this is what we are providing at Norsepower mechanical sails.
Well, thank you very much for that. My understanding is that it would be used on board a vessel to supplement the power being used from required from other sources, but used together, we reduce the carbon emissions of the vessel substantially. Alex, would this technology have application together with LNG propulsion?
Absolutely. LNG propulsion or any other fuel, it cannot be seen as a standalone solution. There are different solutions that are applicable in each particular case, depending on distance, depending on geography, depending on availability of different fuels. For example, in Norway, you have a lot of clean and sustainable energy, renewable energy that can produce perhaps green hydrogen. In that case, green hydrogen may be a good solution, and there are a lot of subsidies around it. So if you go in the coastal area of Norway, even though they have a lot of fossil fuels, as we all know, it could very well be that they can be the protagonists when it comes to hydrogen. Ammonia, methanol. We see some initiatives now. Maersk, for example, there are production plants in Denmark that are also heavily subsidized. So for local feeder container solutions, yeah, that could be a solution. Absolutely. But LNG, we've been focusing on LNG because so far, and of course, wind not excluded, because wind is always there and can always top up, or even provide its own alternative for propulsion on a standalone solution, depending on what your speed target is. LNG is perhaps the only possible solution for deep sea shipping in the near to medium to longer term. I always joke around a little bit, and when people talk about the solution for the future, I say, give me first your definition of how long is the future. What is it for you? Is it like 15 years, 20 years, 25, 50, 100, or like China's the next 400-year plan? If we're talking about ships that are being built today, you have few practical, real solutions that are within the cost boundaries to make your operation efficient and competitive. So, and that one of them is definitely with quite a difference, LNG. Now, if you couple that with some more technologies and create a hybrid vessel, so add to it wind power, add to it perhaps a little bit of green hydrogen, mixed in the combustion cycle of internal combustion engines, you can go up to 20%. Add to it biogas that we all produce from our waste. That becomes a very competitive solution in the end. So it's not one solution, it's a mix of solutions. Electrical ferries, for example, battery operated ferries, short distances, yeah, absolutely possible. Everything is possible, depending on range, geography, subsidies, available fuel sources or energy sources. Everything is possible. And the best solutions are none of the above singly, they are hybrid.
So, when we talk about timeline, I think we're also talking about the state of advancement with respect to these different technologies. So, we've touched on a few of them, everything from, LNG to hydrogen. We've mentioned ammonia and methanol. But is the technology there across all of these options? Or is it only that we're advanced enough to really power a ship get the power we need to push a ship across the ocean with certain of these technologies? What's the state of play there?
Technologies are there, definitely there. But it's always a factor of, cost and what you do with the ship. When you're building a ship, you have certain considerations, and one of them is volume. So if you're going to carry hydrogen to propel it, you might as well forget a little bit about the cargo space, right? Because the density of the fuel is such that to get the same output, you need lots more volume in the tanks. And then, of course, how about the cost? So at the end, you have a universe of solutions that in each applicable, in each case, they apply differently. And so the technologies are there, but the application differs every time.
And then I suppose there's also a parallel discussion to be had about availability and infrastructure.
Right.
Robert, what would you say about that?
It's not the high level conversation, but often the logistics in regards to the supply of the feedstock is what drives the ultimate solution, right? And that needs to be available. From the methanol perspective, it's widely available globally. It's roughly 122 ports already in bunker quantities, and so it already exists. And to ramp it up from basically a chemical commodity to transportation fuel doesn't take. It's not a big leap to go from here to there, and so that's and the other part of the methanol is that the training and just how you deal with it from the owner operator and the people who are facilitating the adoption. You're not having to retrain an entire industry. If you can work with bunker oil, you can work with methanol. And so I think that's one of the key considerations that owners are looking at is how are they going to get the feedstock or the fuel they need to accomplish the mission of their vessels.
Dallas, what would you say about this? Are certain technologies more in the lead from the registry perspective?
Yeah, I'd definitely say, LNG's out front leading the way. But the growth we're seeing from hydrogen, ammonia, methanol is substantial. We're leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 5 years ago. I think LNG, kind of kicked off as a fuel. LNG has been a fuel on gas carriers for 50 years. So it's been proven. And then, there was a real push probably starting about 2013 for LNG. But then, 2017, 2018, with, the Paris Agreement and, IMO's strategy, the focus kind of started to shift to a carbon-free option. So I can definitely say from what I've seen, hydrogen and ammonia is really picking up speed. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know when this is going to happen and when it's going to be, which fuel is going to be the fuel of the future. But I kind of agree with the other panelists that it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. I think there's going to be a little of all options going forward.
Greg, if I may briefly add, one thing that I agree with Alex was saying is this flexibility is going to be key in the future, and that plays a role in what some of the other folks were saying, that if we can't just have this negativity suddenly. We went from no one even believing in LNG, no one believing in wind and wind propulsion, to suddenly saying, oh, LNG is already old history, and going straight to hydrogen ammonia. Well, I wouldn't discount LNG because carbon capture is happening. We've already met 2050 before we even know what's happening with ammonia engines, which are still being developed. Carbon capture is just as far from the future. And the next step is everyone's going to say hydrogen and methanol and ammonia don't work because they're not green ammonia and green hydrogen. I think we need to focus on developing the infrastructure, developing the technologies before we start, tearing things down. We're always negative about everything and slow with everything. And then suddenly when it happens, we're already discounting everything that just happened.
So I think you just said something very interesting. You said we can already meet 2050 with existing technologies. And I wanted to steer the discussion in that direction, just to try to assess, are we there? Some of us had a discussion, preparing for this panel. And I was really impressed to hear that I think there's an argument that we can build, tell me if I'm wrong, a carbon neutral ship now. Is that really the case? I see Alex shaking his head, yes.
Yeah, yes, it is. Well, carbon free, no. Carbon neutral, yes. Carbon negative, yeah, sure. You can do it. 2050 is, let me rewind and replay. 2050 is going to become stricter, only because we can already meet it today. So, newsflash, 2050 is not going to be 2050 at 2050. It's going to be stricter. So, just because we can meet it today. So, as I said before, LNG coupled with wind power, coupled with biogas, or perhaps replace LNG into biogas. It's possible. A complete load of biogas that you burn. Add to it hydrogen, and voila, you've exceeded 2050 targets already now.
Yeah, I would like to echo that in regards to there's low carbon solutions that are available to deploy today. And depending on the feedstock, and there's a tremendous investment going on right now in the production of various biogas or e-methanols or biomethanols. There's all these different colors of green feedstocks that are available, and the investment is there. In fact, within our organization, we're also looking at partnerships in regards to significant quantities of green methanol to power the fleet that we're producing here in the tugboat world.
So, obviously time is short, but, there's we can just talk a bit about the costs of all these technologies and whether the investing community is there yet, or if we all have to do some work to attract more investor interest. I know, Tuomas, what are you seeing from your perspective?
As said, I think we can already today make these carbon neutral ships, but maybe the, let's say, investment horizon, it's not yet there. The paybacks would be rather long and the energy prices would be rather high compared to today's fossil fuels. But I see that the market is changing. Carbon prices are coming to the market, energy prices are increasing, and regulation is stepping in. I think that there will be a pretty fast transformation to kind of carbon neutral shipping. And I also see it so that the asset value of a ship can quite soon be maximized by making it as low emission ship as possible. I think that will change on the market, and that will have a big influence on what kind of ships we are really building today and in the near future.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that really sets the stage for more equity investment. We know about the banks and their interest. Maybe one last question, and we'll wrap it up with this. What about the customers? What about the charterers for these ships? Are they on board yet? A lot of them are big organizations that have their own ESG pressures. But is a charterer willing to pay a higher rate in the near term, or do we still have some work to do there?
From my perspective in the inland waterways, I'm going to say yes, but it's your blue chip type customers who have significant ESG goals and investor pressure to execute on their plan. And so they will pay the premium in the early days. As the cost goes down, it will make itself available to other operators.
Is that also the case in ocean shipping? Alex, what do you think?
Well, charterers are looking for the cheapest solution, but in the age of digitalization, like Marina was saying before, pretty soon they'll be losing their importance. That's what I feel. You know, it's end-to-end, point-to-point kind of employment, and charters are yet another intermediary.
Okay. Well, I think we've exhausted our time. This is such a rich topic, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. But I hope everybody feels like they've had a chance to talk a little bit about what you're doing. I think we've tried to join together these different themes. I'm actually quite conscious, since we're going to do a Q&A. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're back in our live Q&A. If anybody in the audience would like to ask questions, we have the chat box on the screen. And we're here with the panel, and we can address questions in real time. This also gives us an opportunity to continue the discussion a bit among ourselves. Robert, maybe I'd come back to you a little bit and talk about the market for among charterers in the U.S. inland marine space, and the trends you're seeing, and why you think this is a good time to, you really think charterers will be there with capital to support the new building projects you described earlier in our session. Oh, you might be on mute, Robert.
Very good. Thank you very much, Greg. Absolutely. The response we got from the workboat show when we announced Hydrogen One, a fuel cell towboat that we're constructing, has been frankly overwhelming. We've got an additional 14 that we're teeing up in that series, and it's all going to the customers that we were just describing earlier. It's typically these blue chip oil majors that are looking to decarbonize their fleet. And so they're able to absorb the initial increased cost for these types of vessels. And so we expect that robust demand to continue here. And we're also, outside of the US market, in Europe, we're also seeing very strong demand from very large and substantial towboat and tugboat operators for the European river system. So we expect, at least in this inertial tranche of customers, there'll be quite a bit of support for the type of vessel, the fuel cell vessel, using our methanol to hydrogen generator technology.
And so how far out are you from having a vessel in the water? And when could we conceivably see a vessel like this trading?
So we are actually, purchase orders are going out. We're looking to start cutting steel in the May-June timeframe, with the idea that it's on the water in October, November 23. We'll do trials and then turn it over to the owner operator here either in December of 23 or January 24.
Well, that's very much right on the horizon. It's very exciting.
Very much so.
Alex, if I could ask you, from in the international market, what do you think about the charterers? I know we touched on them in the recorded session, but obviously getting a critical mass of charterers who are really willing to pay for a dual fuel vessel is fundamental. What's the state of play there?
I've said it before, I'll say it again. Charterers are looking for the cheapest solution. And they're usually very allergic to higher costs. So they, when you present them a solution that makes sense from a financial point of view, they'll hear it. If it doesn't make any financial sense, they won't. They will go for the cheapest. So the thing here is that while all the pressure is being put from a regulatory point of view, the immediate financial benefits to the charters are not clearly visible. The one fuel that actually presents a viable alternative today is LNG because it's cheaper. If you're talking about hydrogen or any other ammonia, methanol, any other fuel, that's more expensive. It's a byproduct. It needs to be produced. It has, a carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. So LNG comes out cheaper as an energy source. That is probably one fuel that they would welcome. Of course, the cost of the ship and the amortization and what burden the ship owner has to face in presenting a better, more viable solution to the charter all has to be taken into consideration. And at the end of the day, charters are not there to foot the bill.
Greg, if I may, I think I disagree to some degree with Alex here. So we've been working with some of the charters, and maybe it's a recent movement. In the past it wasn't the same, but a lot of the traders and charters that we work with have started implementing their own internal carbon pricing, anywhere between 50 and 150 of where it's going to be, in the next few years. So knowing that, they realize that, whether it's EU ETS or just other carbon taxes coming, they understand that fuel is going to get more expensive. So, a more fuel efficient or, less carbon intensive ship will actually have that payback that, like Alex is saying, they're going for the cheapest solution. Well, soon enough, the cheapest solution will be the most efficient, the least carbon intensive ship. And they're seeing that. And that's why, like Robert was saying earlier, you're seeing more of these projects going, instead of just simple pilots, going into full scale commercialization and ordering actual ships with it.
What kind of timeline are charterers looking at for, the prospect of higher rates, to pay off in terms of what they need to achieve institutionally?
I mean, they've already started the process. I don't think they expect alternative fuels to really, at least other than LNG, to have a significant share before 2030. But they're already taking that into account because they realize ship owners are going to start placing orders. These charters are going to start having long-term charters. And if you're going to have anything with a 5-year charter, you're going to want to play some role into what the ship owner is ordering. So at the very least, you're seeing them, this pressure to work with their partners to do, ammonia ready, LNG ready, this, whatever, something ready rather than just installing a scrubber on.
Okay.
If I could add there, Greg, there's some applications where they have no choice but to have an alternative green fuel. Think of offshore vessels supporting wind farms on Europe or on the East Coast. Those companies do not want any kind of a hydrocarbon in their propulsion system at the same time that they're trying to maintain these entirely clean energy sources. And so there's a number of applications where they have to do that today, even if the LNG is a bridging fuel for 10 or 20 years. These other ones will be growing in demand, starting with these core that have to take action today.
That's an interesting example of how one industry can influence progress in another. Alex, do you have any further thoughts based on what Nikos was saying?
Well, yeah, it depends on, usually it depends on your time horizon. So Nikos is right in the sense that charters are starting to look at the medium longer term. But if you go to them now, their main consideration is always cost. So most of the charters that we have addressed the ones that see it positively are usually the ones that have their own cargoes. So in that case, they're not acting as an intermediary. If they don't have their own cargoes and they're just pure intermediaries, then they're looking always for the cheapest solution. And the ones that move are, of course, the bigger ones, the bigger players in the industry, the ones that would like to show a green side to their operations, or the ones that are mandated to do so by ESG and other mandates that they have to face. So they're the ones that perhaps will be the first ones to move. However, as I say, and I keep on saying it, no one wants to foot the bill at the end of the day unless obliged to.
If I could echo some of the things that Alex is saying, Greg, I do agree that at the end of the day, everyone's got their ESG goals, but their ability to adopt is going to be driven by the economics of it. If it's not economically viable, it can't be adopted. And so when you look at what we're doing at E1, that really is the strength of our business case here. We're providing a low carbon option with gray methanol to zero emission green methanol. And it has a very high energy density and a cost profile that is similar to the fuel oil that it's replacing. So from a OpEx standpoint, we're hitting the same notes that Alex is able to hit with the LNG, with a higher energy density feedstock, and we're driving the cost out of the fuel cell solution because you don't have to deal with the storage aspects and the compromises you have to cargo.
Well, that's excellent. Let me go to Tuomas for a second. Do you have any perspective on the charterer story with respect to your customer base and demand for your technology?
Yeah, I actually do. I see more and more deals emerging where charterers and owners can in a way find an agreement why they want to have our rotor cells on board. Of course, they can reduce the fuel consumption and emissions between that 5 and 20%. Today, the payback still for the technology with current energy prices are maybe between 3 and 9 years. For those shorter paybacks, it's evident that they can in a way finance this saving and the added capex during that typical charter period. But I also see a lot more those like longer payback deals being financed. And I think the background is that charterers are already discounting this carbon pricing somehow. So really, I think the market is going in favorable direction. Also, the owners see that they can maximize the asset value. Best chance is to charter the same ship again if they invest in this kind of technology and minimize the fuel consumption and emissions. So these kind of deals are emerging on the market, and we will see a lot more of them in the future.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm getting a signal that time is very short. I just wanted to go to Marina and see. I know you were giving us thoughts primarily on the digital side of the innovation story in shipping. But what's your take on charterers? What role do they have to play in the things you're involved with?
I mean, I would say overall, what we're talking about is there needs to be a combination of factors that need to take place in terms. In regards to making things change. And that's a regulatory push and also an openness and motivation to be innovative. And that motivation is cost savings at first, and now also the environmental impact. And then, a new product and type of technology in that market space and a timeline to get there. So I think that all of those factors combined can change the mindset and culture of a legacy industry like shipping, and it has. If you know that one customer is going to be compared to another, and if one has more environmentally friendly type of fuel or technology that can help reduce emissions, then they might win that over their competition. So there's a lot that goes into play, but I agree with Alex in terms of, just knowing as a ship owner that cost is incredibly important, and you can sort of start there. And I do think that the environmental impact is getting up there and is almost, if not just important. It is, in my opinion, but I think that it's becoming just as important to everybody else because of the regulations and because of the mindset and because of the innovation taking place. And so, yeah, I would say that, you know, from our end, the technology can do all of those things. We just have to get everybody on board.
I think that's a pretty good summary of the story here. You know, I want to thank everybody for participating in the audience as well. I think we've touched on such a large number of themes. We've laid the foundation for a number of panels. We could talk about each of the technologies in more depth. We could talk about the impact of the digital transition. We could talk about infrastructure and whether we need more regulation to push these charterers to make their decisions to support these trends sooner. But we'll leave that for future conferences. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you all again soon.
Good afternoon.